Ever get this like weird feeling that deep down your brain is way more complex than we give it credit for?
Hmm.
Well, get ready, because today we're diving into a topic that basically confirms that suspicion. We're talking about this wild thing called genomic mosaicism.
Okay.
And trust me, it's gonna turn what you thought you knew about DNA upside down.
Yeah.
Basically, your brain cells, they aren't all genetic clones, which is what we used to think, right?
Right, right. It really challenges this simple idea we all learn in, like, high school biology, one genome, one person.
Totally.
Turns out it's way more interesting than that. We're talking about tiny variations in DNA between the very cells in your brain.
So, for this deep dive, we're going deep into some serious science here. We've got excerpts from this 2018 scientific review paper, and the title alone, I mean, it sounds like a sci-fi thriller, Genomic Mosaicism in the Developing an Adult Brain.
Catchy.
Right. But that means we're talking about a ton of research all distilled down into, like, the really good stuff. So
Exactly.
we get to benefit from all that work.
Yeah, and what's so fascinating about this is that, this isn't some rare, bizarre phenomenon. This is surprisingly common. It's almost
Like what?
like each brain cell has its own kind of unique genetic story, which is, I don't know, I think that's really cool.
Okay, so before we go too far down the rabbit hole of all the sciencey
Yeah,
details,
yeah.
let's break this down for everyone. Genomic mosaicism, when we say that, what are we actually talking about here?
Okay, so imagine your DNA as a blueprint.
Okay.
You've got one for your entire body,
All
right?
right.
But when we're talking about genomic mosaicism, it's like each time that blueprint gets copied to make a new brain cell,
Yeah.
tiny errors can kind of slip in.
Interesting.
Like, those copy of a copy moments where the text gets a little blurry?
Totally, yeah.
Those errors, that's
Yeah.
what we're dealing with here.
Okay, so it's not just that, like, I inherited a gene from, I don't know, my great aunt, and that's it. It's that my DNA can actually change throughout my life, and, like, specifically in my brain cells.
You got it.
Yeah.
It's not set in stone the way we used to think.
Mm.
And to be clear, these aren't like temporary tweaks or anything.
Right.
We're talking alterations to the actual DNA sequence.
Oh.
And it gets even more interesting. There are different levels of this mosaicism.
Oh, okay, so, like, levels of genetic rebellion happening in my brain.
Well, not rebellion exactly, but yeah, different degrees of variation. And there are three key features that define genomic mosaicism. First, it's somatic,
Somatic.
meaning these changes happen after fertilization.
Okay.
So as your brain develops, it's also picking up these unique variations. It's not inherited from your parents.
So my brain cells are, like, writing their own genetic side stories as I live my life.
Kind of. It's like this hidden layer of complexity in how our brains develop.
What's the next key feature then?
Second, and this is a big one, we're talking about changes to the actual DNA sequence itself. Not just how the DNA is packaged or expressed, what we call epigenetics. This is about the actual letters of your genetic code getting,
Getting what?
shuffled around, changed.
Okay, that's some serious rewriting going on.
It is.
And the third key feature of this whole genomic mosaicism thing.
This mosaicism includes all kinds of DNA alterations. We're talking big changes like a brain cell ending up with an extra chromosome, all the way down to tiny typos, where a single letter in the DNA code gets swapped.
Wow, okay. A whole
A
spectrum.
whole shebang. It's wild.
So we're not just talking about one type of genetic change, it's a whole buffet of variations all happening inside our brains. Man, this is already making my head spin, and we're
Yeah.
just getting started. Okay, so my brain is this mosaic of genetically unique cells. Like, my mind is officially blown. But what does that actually look like? If genomic mosaicism were a movie, who are the main characters in this genetic drama?
Ooh, I love that analogy. And just like any good movie, we've got a whole cast of characters here. Some are big and dramatic.
Yeah.
Others are more subtle.
Okay, so who's stealing the spotlight in this genetic blockbuster? Who are our A-listers?
Imagine a brain cell going totally rogue.
Okay.
Just like deciding it needs an extra chromosome.
Whoa.
Or maybe even ditching one altogether.
No way.
That's our leading character, aneuploidy, sometimes called aneuploidy.
So we're talking about a cell, like, going full-on extra chromosome while all its neighbors are like, dude, what are you doing?
Exactly. Picture a cell in your brain deciding, you know what? I'm going to be trisomic just for kicks. It's like that one friend who always has to be a little bit different.
Okay, yeah, that's a pretty memorable character for sure. Who else is showing up to this genetic party?
Next up, we've got the line 1 retrotransposons.
Oh, what?
Line 1 retrotransposons, also known as jumping genes. Imagine little snippets of DNA that have this, like, superpower to copy and paste themselves into different parts of your genetic code.
Hold on, hold on. These line 1 things, they're just bouncing around, inserting themselves wherever they please. Sounds like my kind of party, honestly.
It can get pretty wild, that's for sure. But here's the thing where they land. That really matters. Imagine them as those friends who, show up to the party uninvited
Okay.
and might accidentally spill something on your favorite rug.
Oh, no.
Depending on where they insert themselves, they can really affect how your genes actually work.
Okay, so jumping genes. Equal parts fun and potential disaster. Got it. What other genetic characters are we dealing with here?
Let me introduce you to DNA content variation, or DCV for short.
DCV. Okay. And what does DCV do?
It's less of a single character and more like a plot twist.
A plot. Okay, tell me more. I love a good plot twist.
So basically, it's a catch-all term for large-scale changes in the amount of DNA within a cell.
Okay.
And we're not just talking, an extra chromosome here. We're talking big swings.
Wow.
It's like suddenly realizing there's this whole hidden chapter in your genetic story that you never knew about.
Okay, DCV, the mysterious plot twist. I'm starting to see why this is a blockbuster movie for sure. What's next?
All right, now we're getting into more of the supporting roles. Copy number variations, or CNVs, these are smaller but still important. Imagine sections of your DNA getting duplicated or deleted entirely.
So it's like some, I don't know, overzealous editor coming in and saying, you know what this scene needs? 5 more copies of this sentence.
Yes. Or maybe they just hit the delete key a few too many times.
Exactly.
And those edits, those duplications or deletions, they can have a real impact on how your genes are expressed, how your cells actually function.
Okay, so CNVs are like the editors of our genetic story, making these subtle but really important changes. But what about the really small stuff? Those tiny typos we talked about earlier.
Yes, those are our single nucleotide variations,
Yeah.
or SNVs. Imagine just changing one letter in a whole book, right?
Mm.
Might seem kind of insignificant.
You're going to tell me those little typos can still mess up the whole story, aren't you?
You know it. Even a single letter change in a gene, it can have this ripple effect,
Huh?
altering the protein that it codes for.
Mm.
Think of it like this: one wrong ingredient in a recipe can totally change the flavor of a dish.
Okay, that's both terrifying and a little bit delicious. So we've got our whole cast of characters here. We've got rogue chromosomes, tiny typos, and everything in between.
It's a wild ride.
It really is. And they're all playing a part in this genomic drama unfolding in our brains. But the real question is, what's the plot? How do these genetic variations actually happen? Okay, so we've got this whole genomic drama, this whole genetic blockbuster playing out in our brains.
Right.
But what's the director's cut look like? What's actually causing all these genetic variations to pop up in the first place?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it turns out one of the main culprits is something that happens every time a cell divides. It's called a mitotic error.
Okay, so picture this. One cell splitting nice and neatly into 2 identical copies, right? What could go wrong there?
You'd be surprised, honestly. It's kind of like if you were trying to make a perfect copy of a blueprint
Yeah.
1 billion times.
Yeah.
Sometimes little errors, they just creep in, especially during those early stages. When your brain is developing and those cells are dividing like crazy chromosomes, they might not get divided perfectly. That leaves some cells with extra or even missing pieces.
Ah, so those aneuploidies we talked about, sometimes they're just a case of cell division gone a little, I don't know, a little wonky. That makes sense. But what about the smaller stuff? The CNVs, the SNVs, they seem a lot more subtle.
Right. So sometimes those division hiccups, they can create these things called micronuclei.
Macronuclei. Okay, that actually sounds kind of cool.
They might have a catchy name, but trust me, they're troublemakers. Picture them as tiny little offshoot nuclei that form when those chromosomes get misplaced during cell division.
Okay.
And these little guys, they often contain damaged DNA,
Oh, no.
which can then get replicated, leading to even more variations down the line.
So it's like this chain reaction of genetic glitches, and it all starts from this one tiny little mistake.
It can snowball, yeah.
That is wild. Okay, so sometimes the problem isn't the copying process itself, but the repair crew.
Sometimes, yeah.
Our cells, they have these amazing mechanisms for fixing damaged DNA.
It's true. It's incredible.
But nobody's perfect, right?
Nobody's perfect.
Even the repair process can introduce errors.
It's true, even with the best intentions.
That's like calling a mechanic to fix your engine, and they accidentally swap out your spark plugs for a carrot.
Right. I mean, not exactly, but
Yeah.
you get the idea.
Yeah.
These repair errors, they might accidentally delete really important segments of DNA. They might duplicate others, or even insert the completely wrong sequence. It's like the
Wow.
repair crew accidentally editing the blueprint instead of fixing it.
That's not good. Okay, so our cells are out here trying their best, but even their best efforts
Yeah,
can actually lead to even more genomic mosaicism.
it's true.
It's like, thanks, I guess. What about those jumping genes, those line ones? Are they just like constantly bouncing around causing chaos?
Not all the time. It's more like during certain periods. Like, think about when your brain was developing.
Yeah.
The genetic doors are a little looser, you know. It gives those jumping genes a little more opportunity to move around and do their thing.
So it's like a genomic free-for-all during brain development.
You could say that.
And these line ones, they're just taking advantage of all the chaos?
Well, they're just expressing themselves, right? But here's the really wild part.
Okay.
Even in a fully developed adult brain,
Yeah.
genomic mosaicism, it doesn't just stop.
What?
Our brain cells, they're constantly active, right?
Yeah.
They're reading their DNA to function. And sometimes that very active reading, it can actually cause damage,
Yeah.
leading to those single-letter swaps, the SNVs.
Wait, so you're telling me that just by like living my life, by thinking and learning and remembering things,
Yeah.
my brain cells are potentially creating like tiny genetic typos?
It's possible.
That is both amazing and kind of terrifying at the same time.
The brain is a wild frontier, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it really highlights just how dynamic our genomes truly are. It's not some like static blueprint.
Yeah.
It's constantly being shaped and reshaped throughout our lives, through our experiences even.
Wow. Okay, so to bring it all back,
Yeah.
we've got this constant interplay of cell division, DNA repair, jumping genes, even just like the very act of
By the
laying...
things we take for granted, right?
Right, and it all contributes to this incredible amount of diversity within our brains.
Which makes you wonder, right? If every single brain is this unique mosaic of genetic experiences, what does that mean for individuality? What makes your brain uniquely you?
That's a really good question. And I think I'm going to need a little more time to ponder that one. But in the meantime, thanks to you all for joining us for this deep dive.
My pleasure.
Until next time, keep those brain cells buzzing, folks.